What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Here with another awesome guest. I'm so very glad to be joined by the one and only Mr. Mikel Paris of O.R and of his own incredible solo work. We already talked about this, but how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Yeah, we were just talking about just the joy of playing music and getting to do that on a regular basis. Just got to do that in Pittsburgh, and nothing feeds the soul quite like it.
Exactly. And now let's get
Yeah,
back into that conversation about like grand pianos and that natural
yeah.
feeling different from a keyboard.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It's uh, it's about the vibrations, man. It's like the sonic vibrations that you get from it, and the feel of the real hammers hitting the felt and the wood. And not to say that there's some keyboards out there that don't have incredible hammer action. My new Korg Nautilus is it's like one of the best feeling piano electric keyboards I've ever played. It has gradient weighting. I've never heard of that before. And but it's the sonic vibrations, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's like it's like having an acoustic guitar pressed against your body when you play it, and you feel the resonance of the wood going through, and it's vibrating through your whole body. It's that similar feeling when you're sitting there behind the piano. And so any of these opportunities I get to play with Mark, where we get to do these like duo stripped down, and it's also really exciting for me, and I know for him as well, to be able to reinterpret songs that you've played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, but to present them in a new format, in a new way, because it makes your brain also think about that exact song differently. Because all of a sudden you're playing stuff that you don't usually play when you play with the band. There's some songs I don't even play piano or keyboards on. And now I'm sitting there with Mark and we're in a duo situation. I'm like, wait, what are the bass notes on that song? I don't even know. I got to figure that out. So it's really it keeps you on your toes, man. I'm a big believer in every day being different and unique in every experience that you have, and for it to never become rote and just doing the same thing every day over and over, playing the same songs the same way over and over again. That, for me, that's not inspiring. You need to keep your brain on edge. You need to live right. That's how I love that. You ride the line a little bit. Sometimes you go this way and sometimes you go that way. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
Beautifully said, beautifully said.
Thanks, man.
Now, I'd love for you to tell me how you stumbled on your very interesting keyboard-like guitar technique, guitar drumming.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
Oh, I'm glad you like it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of a stumbling upon. It was just finishing college. I had my first apartment with my roommate in Hartford, Todd, and we were just staying up late one night, and he had an acoustic guitar, and then we had those juggling sticks, the devil sticks lying around that are wrapped in that tape that you see at festivals and stuff. People's juggling, it's incredible. And so I picked those up and I started drumming on the strings as he was playing chords. And I really was intrigued by that percussive nature, that sound of a slightly muted instrument, which resembles a finger, actually. When you think about the way the rubber tape was wrapped around those wooden sticks, it's kind of like a finger. And then I got into Stomp years later. And that show and those guys, the creators of that show, really inspired me to think back to that moment where I was doing this really interesting thing with my friend. And I was like, well, let me re let me re-explore that. Let me go back to that, because Stomp looks at the world in a very unique, different way. Those guys saw music and rhythm in everything, in objects around us. You can make music and hear rhythm. I remember Luke always talking about when you're in the womb and you hear the heartbeat of your mom. That's rhythm. We are being infused with rhythm from the get-go. And so that really inspired me to think back to that moment and say, okay, well, how can I do this by myself? I don't want to have a partner to play this thing. And so I just, this position is a natural position as a keyboard player, as a piano player for me. I broke this wrist in high school, and I do remember trying to play acoustic guitar normal traditionally, and it just was so uncomfortable and it really hurt. Maybe I didn't get the greatest direction also or instruction on really how to play that way. So I stopped that and I was like, all right, let me just, I'm a piano player. I'm a piano player. And then I laid the guitar flat and started experimenting with different tunings. And again, Luke and Steve, the creators of Stomp, really gave me the confidence to pursue something different. You know, they were on the streets of Brighton busking with trash cans, and people were walking by like, what is this? And they're like, no, we're onto something here. So that's kind of how I felt with this guitar drumming thing, was like I knew I was sort of onto something and I wanted to explore it, and I didn't want it to be a gimmick. I wanted it to be, from my high school graduation, I remember writing my first song on the piano for my high school graduation. I always looked at myself as a songwriter, not somebody that was necessarily going to be a virtuosic instrumentalist. I knew I wasn't going to be a classical pianist. I knew that from the get go. I love classical music, and that's what I grew up playing, was classical, classical, classical. But I knew it wasn't going to be a virtuosic instrumentalist. I knew that I wanted to always try and push the boundaries of how I presented my music and being a songwriter. And so this guitar drumming style, I wanted it just to be another way that I write music. Sometimes I write on the piano, sometimes I write just singing a bass melody. And, musicians, we have thousands of voice memos on our phones. It's so easy now just to be able to, I got an idea, and just get it down and record it and go back and think about it later. And so it became this other way that I write songs and write music. And I wanted it to be really rooted in groove and pocket and rhythm. I didn't want it to just be really loose, kind of free exploration of, there's so many incredible people that approach the acoustic guitar in unique different ways. You know this as well as I do. I'm certainly not the only one. There's so many amazing people that have thought about this instrument in their own way. And I like to think that my journey as a musician and as a performer is part of why I play the guitar like that. And it's just become this intensely organic, rhythmic, driving texture that over the years, it's been over 2 decades of really developing and honing this style. It's just become second nature for me now. So sometimes when I talk about it and people ask me about like specific things about the technique, I have to like break it down sometimes, and go, okay, well, what is my left hand doing and my right hand? And what are the thumbs doing and the fingers? And how do these interact? And sometimes this finger's underneath the neck doing rhythmic stuff as this one's on the body. And it's this sort of dialogue, I guess, between all my fingers on this instrument. And then, stomp is still with me as part of my musical vocabulary. So I have a stomp platform when I perform live that my dad and I built. It's like a 2x2, and I put a microphone underneath it. So it's that as well. It's this guitar drumming, but stomp has been a real through line, I guess, a driving force through this whole style and journey of me finally now, which is exciting to me, finally getting it out and sharing it with people, and sharing all these songs that I wrote years ago in this style, this guitar drumming style. I've got 3 albums planned, guitar drumming, focused on that style. But I hope that answers your question.
No, it totally does. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. It's very interesting, and I love having that conversation with you about it. Um, a technique that's so kind of revolutionary and different and like totally weird that you kind of figured out is it's pretty perfect. And from the keyboardist perspective, I used to play keyboard.
Okay.
Getting to see that is super interesting because now I am a guitar player, and getting to see those two worlds kind of combine. One of the things that I know I think about a lot when listening to that kind of music is that how is the songwriting? Because you were talking about you wanted to combine these worlds in all aspects and make it so they're kind of one. How does the songwriting differ when you're on your guitar versus on your keyboards or your grand piano?
Yeah, it does. It does differ. And again, a lot of my songwriting isn't me even necessarily on an instrument, because everything inspires me, walking in nature, traveling, reading, watching a movie, like inspiration for creativity can come from anything. So I often find myself just doing something mundane, making a cup of tea or something, and then an idea or a rhythm or a melody will come to me at that point. So often for me, it's then organically and in the moment, what is what does that idea feel like it wants to gravitate towards? Me going and sitting down at the piano, me sitting at a guitar, and now it's even to the point where I'll just try both. I'll try, let me try that idea and take out the guitar. Let me try it on that. Oh, okay, that's freaking cool. So often, on guitar drumming, this first album, you hear me on the keyboards also all over the place. And like you said, it was this, how do I combine these styles? How do I combine the two things that I feel like are my through lines, my driving force as a musician, piano and this guitar drum and vocally. I mean, obviously, this is an instrument too, right? So we can't forget that. We can't forget that. Those three things really, I guess. And this album was a real experiment in that. It was an experiment in how the conversations between a Rhodes and a Wurlitzer and a piano happened with this guitar drumming, and and it's also been an exercise for me in learning about, and embracing less is more and embracing the space between and allowing, not feeling like I have to cover every single rhythmic beat and moment with this guitar drumming style because it can get frenetic and it can get just like crazy at times. But I think I'm at the point now where I'm really able to present it in a fashion that it kind of takes all these different approaches and in the context of one song, just like in the context of one day that we experience, right? You go through all sorts of different emotionally, your thoughts, everything, how you're feeling, right? Happiness, sad, angry, all that stuff. And so for this guitar drumming style, I feel like now I've gotten to the point where the songs sort of go through a similar journey. They sort of technique wise, even where I'm not always just slapping and hitting it. There's times where I'm plucking it and it becomes sensitive and tender. And then there's times where we're back to the drive and we're chugging along, It's really exciting to talk about it, man. And it's good to have different questions because it makes me think about my journey in different ways as well. So keep them coming. Keep them
Of
coming.
course, and I'm glad
Yeah,
that you
man.
like figured this out in the first place. Um, Speaking of journey, you talked about you have three albums planned. You've already got one. What is this kind of what is this journey? What is this map that you want to take us on throughout these three albums? Do you want to continue with the same themes that we're seeing on this album? Or do you want to explore maybe different musical styles, genres, like making it more and more experimental as we go on?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. The first two albums for me really were I've got this back catalog of these guitar drumming songs that are really that's the focus and the drive of it. I know they're going to be on the first two, and it was sort of just making sense of all those songs and also trying not to just have songs that necessarily were, songs that have been with me for decades. I wanted it to be a good sampling of songs that are also newer for me, and but thematically it's interesting that you bring that up because that's not necessarily always the first thing I think about. Is there a through line to this collection lyrically, but also emotionally and tempo and what key am I in and the timbres and the instrumentations that I'm using. So all I could say to that really is that I think it's going to continue to be an experiment for Guitar Drumming 2 and Guitar Drumming 3 in exploring this conversation, exploring how these different instruments can have a dialogue with this style of guitar that hasn't really had a lot of conversation with these types of instruments. Not to say again that I'm the only one doing this, but part of me likes to think and hope that maybe I am, one of the few people playing it exactly this way, right? With this exact tuning and how I'm holding it and how I'm integrating all the different aspects of the knocking and the thumbs and the plucking and the poking, all that stuff, right? And maybe there's, since I was a kid, some desire for me to feel like I've created something that's Mikel Paris, that's mine, that's me. Like I'm, you know, you make your stamp on this world somehow. You leave something, a legacy. You know, in addition to the songs and the music, you know, there's always been that desire for me, I guess, to be unique. You know, I don't know, and I feel like this is part of what makes me unique is this guitar drumming style. It's not the whole story, you know, it's just part of the story. So for the second album, it's definitely going to be some more of these songs that have been with me for a while. And I've basic tracked all the songs pretty much for guitar drumming too. However, there's a new one that I'm working on now that I really want to have as like a summer jam. And the other thing that also is really exciting for me, and we haven't really talked about it, is these collabs that I'm doing.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
that's another thing is that's really exciting for me with some of these songs too, is that having a fresh pair of ears on them, you know. G Love, here's this track I'm thinking about, you know, now I'm just do you, you know. That's why I'm asking you to do it of good nature, like, you know, like let's work on this song because it's been with me for a while and I want a fresh take on it. You know, so I've got some collabs already lined up for guitar drumming too. I'm still putting some feelers out for a couple, but that's a great thing for me as part of this conversation too. And the dialogue that guitar drumming has is not just with other instruments, but also with other people, with other artists. You know, how does this inspire a drummer to play who's never played with someone doing this on the guitar before? You know, how does this inspire a vocalist or, you know, a horn player, whatever, you know? And so it's really exciting to me to see that moment when people are hearing it or seeing it for the first time, because I'm really curious to see how it just affects them, whether positive, negative, whatever. Just I'm just it's exciting for me to see that. You know, I remember just when I was early on in my stomp days and I was really starting to explore this guitar thing, and I was on tour with the group and we were in some hotel someplace, and someone had a guitar and I took it in the corner and sort of did my little open tuning, and I started working on one of the jams that's on this record, Move It, which starts the album and then finishes it as an acoustic. So I just started jamming on that pocket and that groove, the doom doom. It's like 121, 122 BPM, somewhere around there. It's like a dance tempo, you know, and like four on the floor. Dude, I can't wait to start playing like big festivals, you know, where people. I did an interview a little while ago, and the guy was like, I'm dancing, listening to you because you know it's like it makes me want to move. I'm like, that's great. You know, I don't feel like I want to be playing sit. Everyone's seated and it's like a quiet, mellow thing. No, like I want people to be able to get up and dance and move. And then there's moments of, okay, we're going to bring it down, just like any concert, hopefully, right? It's got a journey and everything. So much to talk about, man. I'll just keep talking. So I want to make sure you get into all the
No,
things
it's
you're
absolutely
interested in.
perfect, man.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. That is super dancey, but it's almost like a jig, you know? It's kind of different than like someone would typically dance to it just because there's so much going on,
Yeah.
which, it is great. And I love that, you have this journey and that you have everything kind of thought out. If you want to bring this to the stage, which, as you're saying, I think you do, are we going to see some kind of tour with this? And like touring is kind of hard to do as a smaller musician. Do you want to maybe bring this on with Or, who's ever touring and ever making music and whatever? So is
Yeah.
this something
So
we can see in all parts of your life?
yes, 100%. And I have, you know, I've opened up for O.A.R. with my solo stuff as well, like throughout the years. Like I've been really fortunate. I'm doing a show with Mark at Hershey Live at the Vineyards in June, and I'm going to open up for him. So I'm really, you know, as in addition to doing collaborations with people on the songs, I'm all about getting on the road and opening up and supporting all of my favorite musicians. I want to be opening up for these people. I want to be getting out in front of new audiences. I've got some solo shows booked, you know, already and for this year, and kind of some of them routing around O.A.R. shows, which has been something I've been really fortunate to be able to do and finally sort of figure out the formula of how I can book solo routing in the context of the O.A.R. touring without having to like cancel and reschedule too much of my solo stuff because an O.A.R. show gets added, you know, a week before or something. Like I didn't want to be that guy that's always having to call up venues and say, "Oh man, I got to reschedule. Sorry, OAR just added the show," because the band is my priority. I mean, why would I not want to play every single possible OAR show that's like a full band show, other than the stuff that gets broken down? Sometimes it's just like duo and radio stuff, but like I don't want to have those conflicts, you know. So it's been this experiment. But this year I've got a bunch of shows booked already. I'm really excited about with some other artist friends of mine, and Simplified and Van Gordon. Like I said, Mark, and I'm doing a bunch of touring with Of Good Nature. We're going to be doing our song Downtime live together, which I that's one of the big joys as a musician when you write stuff is that first time you play it with a band. You're like, I've been playing these songs just solo by myself, which is exciting and I love it. But that first time when you hear people who've done their homework and their due diligence and they've learned the song, and you go, I'm playing at the Wiley House in Florida, and the Wiley House has an amazing house band. And I remember that first time I went and did a show there, and we started the first song in rehearsal, and drummer just counted it in and we played through it perfectly. I just was like grin, like, that feeling of like people respecting something you wrote and then learning it and then presenting it and then feeling like they want to do the song justice. That's how I've always felt. If I'm learning someone else's song, I want to do your song justice, you know. I want to do it at least as well as anybody else that's played it with you, you know. I don't ever think I'm going to do it better than anyone, but I want to at least do it as well, so that the artist, so that the one that wrote the song feels like, thank you, thank you for bringing that something I created to even more life and give it even, you can do a lot by yourself as a solo artist. You can with the music and the songs and how you present it, and getting into loops and tracks and all that stuff, but there's nothing like playing with other musicians. There's nothing like it. There's just nothing like it. And that's why doing these shows with Mark too, sometimes where it's just two of us and he's on his acoustic guitar singing, I'm on the piano singing a little, and then it's just like it's like telepathy,
Yeah.
it really is. It's magic. It's unexplainable. You can't possibly explain that feeling of being in that moment, creating, playing songs that but you've never played this way before. You never played it exactly that way before, and you're not necessarily sure where we're going with it next. But that's the exciting thing. I love it so much. I wouldn't have it
Exactly.
any other way. Wouldn't have it any other way.
I totally agree. That's my jam whenever I do stuff, you know? I think as a musician, as all musicians, kind of getting to improvise and towing that line, like we talked about before, is
Yes.
just the perfect thing, you know?
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Um, as my last kind of question, I want to discuss your legacy, which we talked about a little bit beforehand, but not only as a musician, as Michael Paris, as your whole individual, what is this book you want to leave, this part in history that you want to leave, and build, working forwards, moving forwards to the next, couple years, decades, whatever it is,
Yeah.
you know? What is that path you want to leave for future generations?
I mean, that's a good question. There's a lot to that answer.
Yeah, loaded question. Gotta love
You
it.
know, and I do hope that I can inspire people. I can inspire people in the ways that I was inspired to, whether it's music or anything, you can create in any discipline, right? It doesn't have to be the fine arts or something necessarily cultural, whatever. It could be anything, but to be open also to the journey. I've learned that really to, you have hopes and dreams, and you think about a plan and a way to attain those, right? And sometimes that shuts you off from opportunities if you try to stick to that, right? So I've really embraced, and I hope that I can inspire people to do that same thing, to just, follow that path and always be doing. Even through all the other things that I've been involved in that weren't my creations, like Stomp and OAR wasn't my creation. The OAR existed, you know, 9 years before I even started playing with them, and even longer than that. I mean, Chris and Mark went to elementary school together and we're playing music together. It's incredible. There's this idea of just, you pursue something that you love and you hope you can make a living out of it. And you never know exactly how you're going to make a living out of what you love to do. But embracing the roller coaster, it's been and I'm the type of person that almost needs the roller coaster. I don't need to go upside down too much, but there's something exciting about this journey, you know? And it is that you think about it's an audio wave also, right? There's something exciting about that sine wave journey of life. I guess that's what they say about like the seasons too, like you experience the four seasons, it gives you appreciation of the other seasons when you experience the winter and you struggle. The struggles are good. And I remember being given guidance once about the more struggles that are being thrown at you could be interpreted as meaning that you're on the right path. It's not going to be easy when you're on the right path, and it hasn't been easy, and hopefully it continues to not be easy, but you overcome, right? And you are a better person for it. And so it's really just being thankful, the legacy of this, you know what makes each of us happy is different too, right? But at the end of the day, as one likes to say, um, I feel that if you're pursuing your journey and what you feel is your truth, and you can navigate right and wrong, right? That that's a great legacy to leave and a great example. You hope that you just lead by example, right? I don't need to write a book. I'd be cool to write my autobiography. I think it'd be really cool and interesting, and a documentary about also, the dichotomy of life too, how you can be in this band that has an amazing audience in 20 years. This is my 20th year with O.A.R. It's incredible. And then you can be pursuing another creative endeavor where you're in your SUV, loading all your own gear and setting up everything and playing in places where maybe there's 10 or 20 people there, and so you have this. I've always had that, I guess, this real, like, I appreciate all sides. I appreciate all sides, appreciate the good, appreciate the bad, appreciate every moment.
Well, that's absolutely perfect. I can't wait to see what else, you do with these next two albums and
Thanks,
keep
man.
on exploring. I've loved this conversation. I hope you have too, I
As
think
have
it was
I.
great.
Yes.
You get
Yeah.
to unload some of that stuff
Yeah, man.
and come to Atlanta. Come to Atlanta and we'll definitely do something, dude.
I'll be so yeah, I'm gonna be there in 2 weeks.
Oh,
You want
shoot,
to?
really?
You want to? Are you there? Do you want to come to the show?
I mean, I gotta check my calendar, but hey, I'll
Brookhaven
text you on
Cherry
Instagram.
Blossom Festival, March 29th, Brookhaven, Georgia. March 29th,
Shoot. Dude, I'll
Saturday.
have to I'll have to let you know, man.
Yeah,
But I
just yeah,
appreciate that, yeah.
yeah, man. Just let me. You have my email, right?
Uh-huh. Well,
Okay.
again, thank you so much. I'll,
Yeah, man.
email you in a couple. And
Yes.
you have a great day.
Thanks, man. You too. Great talking.
Yes, sir.